Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi there, Peter Moriarty here, and in this episode of Business in the Cloud, we're covering how to implement a disaster recovery plan. Now, this is a crucially important one for your business. Hope you enjoy following along. We're going to get into the good stuff. So the problem is you need to make sure you have a plan. You need to have something to do when something goes wrong with the technology in your business. Now, what a disaster recovery plan means is, well, we're not planning for a disaster to happen, but we're planning what are the steps that we are going to take if something does go wrong. And by disaster recovery mean, well, what if we experience data loss in the business? What if we have a crucial platform or system in the business go offline or disappear or have a problem? And how do we actually take steps to mitigate that in the event that something does happen? Now, there are some simple and easy things that you can do to prepare to make sure that your business doesn't suffer massive loss if something does go wrong in the business. And so what we're looking to do is identify risks. We're looking to see how we can prevent risks in the business. And for that, we need a disaster recovery plan. So a disaster recovery plan it may be a document, but most of all, it's a set of steps that you can do in preparation for something going wrong. Yes, you're of course going to have steps that you need to take, well, if a system is offline or if something is unavailable, but the most important steps are the steps you take now in the preparation for something going wrong, because there are quite often simple steps that you can do to make sure that you're well protected. So let's jump into what we're going to cover in this episode. So first up, it's going to be understanding the goals of a disaster recovery plan. What exactly does it achieve? What does it need to do? Next up, recovery time objectives. So what do they mean? That's an interesting word. Well, we're going to go through that. Next, how to know when your data is really safe. How do we know whether or not our data is safe on the systems that we're using, and which systems can we trust? How to properly document your IT assets. We're going to show you how you can make that happen easily. Next up, knowing which cloud services you can trust with your data. Data portability, understanding that and understanding how to get your data out. Next up is backup options for the cloud services that you're using. And finally, performing system failure testing, actually testing out to make sure that your disaster recovery plan works. So let's get started and jump right in. So why is it important, and what are the goals of a disaster recovery plan? Well, we want to make sure that we have steps to do before the event of a disaster, before something goes wrong, but also steps that we take afterwards as well. And you would have heard me just a couple of moments ago alluding to the fact that a disaster recovery plan should be a document. It should be something that you, the business owner, but also other key members of staff have access to in the business. Because remember, one thing that might happen is, well, you, the business owner, might actually step out of the business or something could happen to you. I know it's not nice to talk about, but from time to time, there may be a risk that arises that you might not be around in the business anymore. And what that means is you want to ensure that the business can continue to operate without you there. But what we're mostly talking about is IT systems failing. We're talking about cloud systems failing or local technology systems failing and causing disruption to the business. We want to make sure that if we have a technology failure somewhere in the business, well, that it's not going to completely stop the business from being able to operate. We want to make sure that we have a plan in place and we know what steps to take if systems are offline, if they're unavailable, or if we perhaps experience data loss. We want to make sure that we're mitigating any of these things potentially happening. So how do we understand this? Well, we need to talk about recovery time objectives. And a recovery time objective is how quickly do we want to have systems, or how quickly do we want to aim to have systems back up and running if there is an issue that happens. So let's say, for example, there's a problem with your website host and your website disappears and it's gone. And you call the host and you say, hey, look, my website's gone. And they say, sorry, we've got a problem. The website's gone. Now, your recovery time objective is how quickly can you get that back up and running and back to where it was. So if you need to employ a web developer or web designer to build you a new website from scratch, that's probably going to take you weeks to get that done. That's a pretty long recovery time. But if you're, for example, taking the preemptive precaution and you're taking your own backups of your website, well, then you may be able to get a website back up and running within a couple of hours, or at worst, maybe within 24 hours. So understanding recovery time objective means, well, how quickly do we need to get critical systems back up and running for our business? Could you survive for a day without your mobile phone, for example? Could you survive a day without your business phone system in the office? Could you survive more than a day without access to your files and documents in your account on Google Drive or other online systems? You've got to have a think about it and include this in your disaster recovery plan. Well, exactly how long are we happy to be offline for with different systems in the business? To what level do we need to be prepared for certain systems to be unavailable if something was to happen to them? And what steps do we need to take to actually recover those? Don't wait until the host is gone and the website's gone before you actually think about, well, how quickly do I want to get my website back up and running if something does go dramatically wrong? Now, it's pretty rare for a website host to completely lose a website, but it's not out of the question, and that means that you do need to prepare and plan for it. So next up, how do we know when our data is really safe? Well, the saying goes that data is not safe unless it's in at least two, typically, and hopefully three, but if it's in at least two geographically dispersed locations. Now, what that means is you need to make sure that any piece of your data exists in more than one physical location. Now, it's not good enough to just trust the cloud and trust that all of your data is going to be completely safe. And that also includes large players like, for example, Xero, Amazon Web Services, if you're using any of their services in your business, or even Google and their services as well. These businesses, while they do a good job of protecting your data, don't always protect you in the event that something happens to them. You need to be careful and make sure that you're taking really good precautions on where that data is stored. So apply that philosophy everywhere in your business. Data is not safe unless it's in at least two physical locations. Now, we've all heard about that person or that friend, or maybe even it's you, that was carrying important data on a USB thumb drive or a USB external hard drive, and they were using that as their backup, except, well, they only had that data in one place. And when the thumb drive or the hard drive was dropped or lost or stolen or something happened, well, then all that data disappeared with it. That's a common thing that happens if someone is not being mindful around actually having data in multiple places at any one time. Now, you need to be careful about the difference between synchronization apps and backup apps. Now, when we think about Dropbox and we think about Google Drive, well, that data is in more than one place. Google Drive data is stored on multiple servers on Google's infrastructure. Google Drive data might also be stored on multiple machines in your business. You might have a copy online in the cloud and then also a copy on your local machine as well. But with a synchronization app like Dropbox, like Google Drive, like Microsoft's OneDrive, well, if I delete a file in one location, it's going to delete it from every single other location that file exists. So what that means is it's not really actually a backup system. It's just a synchronization system. So be careful that, well, data stored in one place will work, but the system is subject to human error. If I delete a file and then after 30 days it's disappeared from the trash, well, someone like Google or Dropbox is not going to be able to recover that for me just because I made a mistake. Just because they have it in 3 different data centers, well, if I delete something, if I give that super robust system the command to delete something, well, then it's just got to follow the rules because it's a system. So we need to think the next step up. What's the next step of actually backing up these systems that we're using? An organization like Xero, who are publicly traded and house all of their data using Amazon Web Services, will have geo-redundant systems so your data is safe. And in all likelihood, you wouldn't really ever expect to have a problem with an application like Xero.com and them looking after your data. But one of the things that you can do for extra safeguarding is actually perform a manual export. Just think to yourself, what would be the effect on your business if there was an issue with a top-tier provider and they came back to you hat in hand and said, I'm sorry, but we've lost some of your data. We had a system error or a nuclear weapon hit our country or something like that happened, something cataclysmic. But how much could you survive if all of your financial data in your business, for example, was gone for the last 5, 10, maybe even 15 years? If that's not something that you could recover from, or if that's not something that you could survive from, well then maybe it's a good idea to take the extra step on doing additional backups. So we're going to talk about some of the ways which you can do that. So far we've covered off the basics. What is a recovery point objective? Why is it important to have a disaster recovery plan? What does that actually look like? And well, how do you know when your data really is safe? We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back shortly with more Business in the Cloud. Peter Moriarty here. Welcome back to Business in the Cloud. And in this episode, we're talking about developing your disaster recovery plan. Now, next up, we're going to talk about how to properly document all of your IT assets. Now, just think about Luke Skywalker when he landed in the swamp at Tatooine. Now, he didn't have a map where he was looking. He was completely lost. Now, just imagine if you were somewhere without a map, how well could you navigate your way around? Not very well. We now have Google Maps. We rely on our GPSs and our phones, and it's really easy for us to find our way. But without a map, without any documentation, if you're somewhere that's unfamiliar to you, well, it can be quite difficult. Now, imagine you have a major disaster, a major outage in your business, and without a map of your systems, without an idea of how things interlink with each other, how well could one of your team members, one of your staff, navigate that disaster, that downtime, that outage? If you don't even understand it fully yourself, well, how well could you navigate that? It's important, crucially important, for us to document our IT systems and have a map, just like an evacuation plan that are posted in buildings all over the world. Make sure that you know how to navigate your way through an IT disaster or some kind of IT outage. And it might just be, at an absolute minimum, knowing where things are and knowing the basics of how things connect together, knowing what systems are dependent on what other systems, and knowing how they all fit in to the big picture in the business. This is a great exercise for you to understand and see how data flows through your business. But also, this is an exercise to see, well, what systems are absolutely necessary and absolutely critical for the business. So the easiest way to get started with documentation is to use a flowchart or a mind map application and link together the different applications and systems in your business. One of the things that you probably want to consider doing is also drawing out a network map of the physical IT hardware that sits in your office as well. Now, let me show you some of the basics of how you can get started with that using an application called Lucidchart. Now, Lucidchart is an application which allows us to do diagrams, flowcharts, business systems and processes online in a cloud-based operating system. And ironically enough, this is also something that you may wish to include in your disaster recovery plan, being that it's cloud-based and you're relying on somebody's third-party system. But this is what a really basic network map looks like. You can see I've got an office here, I've got a firewall, a printer, there's even still a server in this office. It's a little bit old school. And here we have the internet and different applications. We've got Google Apps, and then we've got devices that staff use as well. Now, that's a basic network map of a basic office, and that's going to include things like IP addresses, information on maybe model numbers on different hardware that's in the office, probably even different support lines for how you get access to support for the different pieces of hardware and also services that are in the office. Now, you should really be building a map like this for all the cloud services in your business as well. Your marketing systems that you use, like Google Analytics, your finance systems like Xero, maybe even your sales systems like your customer relationship management software, and making sure that you've got all of them documented with who do you go to for support, what do you.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.